Welcome to today's City Council meeting. We are grateful to have you joining us as we continue to hold electronic meetings. Welcome to the members of the public who may be watching our usual video feeds online. Even though we are not in person, this meeting is still considered an open and public meeting. Today is a work session only and there's no public comment scheduled. However, Tuesday, June 15th will be the next opportunity for the public to comment during our 7 p.m. formal meeting. Your feedback is always welcome and you can share with the City Council anytime by mailing us at P.O. Box 145476, Salt Lake City, Utah 84114, or emailing us at council.comments@slcgov.com, or by calling our 24-hour phone comment line at 801-535-7654. We are on item number 1, which is generally an update from the administration. I don't know if we need an update from the administration today. Since we're just doing budget stuff, I don't know if anyone from the administration is here yet. So I am going to move to agenda item. Actually, I'm going to move to agenda item number 3 because I don't actually think we need an update from REP either. So with that, we will turn to agenda item number 3, which is the budget proposal from our attorney's office. Before we begin, I will turn it over to Libby from the council staff, and then.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Before that, I just wanted to ask a question, and it's budget related in regards to policing, and we can get back to me on this, but it's been brought to my attention that a lot of our police officers have expired body armor, and a lot of their vehicles are not equipped with some of the equipment that most police officers should have, like spikes in the back that help make their jobs a lot more efficient and not put them in dangerous circumstances. So my request would be to the administration to find out how many of those are expired and what it would take to get those non-expired.
Okay. I think we can put that on staff to follow up with administration for that question, if that's okay, James? Perfect.
Got it, and we're following up.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I will turn it over to Libby from council staff to give us a report, overview of the city attorney's budget, and then we have Katie Lewis, our city attorney, Cindy Lou Trishman, our city recorder. I believe Sim Gill will be here at some point, our district attorney, and Scott Fisher, the first assistant prosecutor. Thanks.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So today we'll be giving a briefing on the city attorney's office. So the office of the city attorney. So the office of the city attorney includes 3 divisions: civil practice, the recorder's office, and risk management. And the city has a contract with the district attorney and his folks where Salt Lake City prosecutors are housed in the same place and work with the district attorney prosecutors. So for members of the public who would like to learn more about this topic, this budget, and those involved, you're welcome to visit our Salt Lake City Council website. There you can find a recording of this briefing along with the staff reports and a brief description. So that is at slccouncil.com. So I'm going to turn it over to the city attorney, Katie Lewis, who will dive in with our city recorder, Cindy Lou Trishman, to talk about some of their budget proposal and some of the neat things that they've been doing. So Katie, I'll let you take over.
Thank you very much, Libby. And hello, council members. It's great to see you today. Thank you so much for spending some time with me and Cindy Lou and members of the prosecutor's office today. And I also want to thank the mayor for her proposed budget this year. Especially this year when it's been so challenging and so uncertain, I want to be sure to acknowledge the support that you all have given our office and how much it means to us. I thought that I would start by I don't have a PowerPoint, and I thought I would start by giving a brief introduction to all the council members about our office and what we do, and then talk briefly about the city attorney's office and the Recorder's Office budget requests, and then hand it over to Sim Gill, who, as Libby mentioned, is the deputized city prosecutor under an interlocal agreement between Salt Lake City and Salt Lake County. Does that work for you, Council Chair? Great, great. The Salt Lake City Attorney's Office serves as the legal counsel for all of the city's needs. We are the in-house law firm for the city, and our objective is to be the best small to mid-sized law firm in the state of Utah. We are small compared to other in-house law firms for capital cities. Denver has approximately 200 lawyers. Boise has approximately 45 lawyers. We have 18 civil attorneys and 35 employees in the prosecutor's office. As Libby mentioned, our department includes the risk division, which you've already talked to in a different budget presentation, the recorder's office, and the city prosecutor. The city attorney's office has 18 civil attorneys. We don't do criminal work for the city, but we do everything else for the city. So any legal advice that any city department or elected official seeks, all the litigation, ordinance drafting, contract drafting, advising you all as elected officials, we do it all. And we, under city code, we advise both the legislative and the administrative branches equally. We also have paralegals and legal assistants, and our leadership is Mark Cottrell, who is the deputy city attorney. And this year we promoted 3 senior city attorneys to positions that we call division chiefs to help spread out the leadership and day-to-day operations. So when you look at our budget and you see the base-to-base changes, that's what that is the promotion for our 3 division chiefs. And that's Kimberly Chitris, Jonathan Papasideris, and Samantha Slark. I'm so proud of these leaders, and I'm so proud of their commitment to our office. Our other division that I'd like to introduce to you today is the City Recorder's Office, and Cindy Lou Trishman is here today, and she's our city recorder. And I can't say enough about Cindy Lou's leadership. She has taken the recorder to new levels. She is grace under fire, and she is thoughtful and responsive. And she was appointed, she reminded me, she was appointed 1 year ago today to this position. And it was one of the best decisions that the city has made. I am so grateful for her work and her assistance every day. The recorder has 7 full-time and 1 3/4-time employee. And 3 of those employees are new this year. And of course, Cindy Lou is also completing her first year, or just completed today, her first year of being recorder. They're working on being responsive to both the legislative and the administrative branches. They're opening up new technologies for all of us, and they're consolidating functions for better transparency and equity for our constituents. And I'm just so pleased about their work. And then again, as Libby mentioned, the prosecutor's office operates under a contract between the county and the city, in which the city deputized Sim Gill to be the city prosecutor. And Mr. Gill serves as the prosecutor and manages all of our city employees in that division. They have 35 employees, and Sim and his team are here today to talk about their budgetary requests. So with that, that's my introduction. I'm happy to talk with you all about the city recorder and the city attorney's office budget requests, although I think, as you'll see, we are pretty static this year. We did have some base-to-base changes and also continued funding for the new positions that the council so generously funded for us in this past year, in which we desperately needed. And then we are also asking for $15,000 approximately for the recorder's office to pay for software to help with social media retention as part of our obligation to keep those materials. So that's the introduction for the city attorney's office and the recorder. If you have any questions for me or Cindy Lou, we are happy to answer them, or we can hand them over to the prosecutors who have other budget requests that they'd like to share with you today.
Thank you, Katie. And council members, do we have any questions for Katie or Cindy Lou? Okay. Sim, I think we will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Council. Thank you, Katie. We just want to say that, first of all, we want to thank the mayor for the budget request that she has made. We had requested additional prosecution support. So I think her proposal is 3 prosecutors and then 1 victim advocate. As you know, that last year was a challenging year for in many ways in terms of the COVID and the impact that we had. And over that caseload, historically, we've been challenged in terms of the number of cases that we've asked our prosecutors to handle. There is a bulge of cases that are in the system, and as we move towards normalization, it's going to be compounding of those 2 matters that give us absolute concern. And so right now, the last year, there was a downtick in the total number of cases filed, and that reduced from about 1,300 cases per attorney down to about 1,100 cases per attorney. And when you look at the ABA standards for misdemeanor prosecution, the ABA standards is roughly about 400 cases per attorney. But I think given the fact that the prosecution does not have the same responsibility to meet with individual victims as defense counsel do, historically, my sense is that we can average about 600 cases per attorney to give us a really good, workable, optimum level. And if we take, for example, the depressed numbers from last year, which as crime sort of number of filings went down with the COVID restrictions, as well as the daytime population that moved away, the 3 new prosecutors taking 2020 numbers would reduce that caseload to about 867 cases per attorney. So that's a long overdue thing that we think that would help us to do our job. The victim advocate request comes after the DA's office had received a federal grant for victim advocates, and we had taken one of those assets and put it in service for Salt Lake City cases for a little bit over 2.5 years, which was to help with the DV cases. But our grant has run out, as well as our grant has been cut back, I should say, because we have to do each year reduction. So we're taking that asset back after about more than 2 years. But what that asset demonstrated was how it helped both manage our caseload as well as serving the needs of victims. So in our conversation with Mayor Mendenhall, we're very grateful for her recommendation, and we'd be happy to answer any other questions that you may have.
Council members? James?
Yeah, Madam Chair. Thanks, Sim. Appreciate that. Your beard's looking really nice, at least from the distance. I've got a couple questions for you. Our call volume for police officers has gone up. So you saying that it's going to go down is that our bill, not our bills, but our cases per attorney is going down. So we know that our call volume has gone up and it's delayed and it's taken 5 times what it normally has. Does that have something to do with the amount of call volume?
Well, what I was referring to was the impact of 2020 and COVID. So last year, our numbers went down because, and remember, our daytime population explodes during the normal working time. So with the people working from home and the reduction of that daytime population, and across the board, given COVID concerns, even the DA's office numbers, our caseload dropped down, and we saw a similar drop down that happened with city cases. And so I was using 2020 numbers to say that our numbers from 2019 went from about 1,300 cases per prosecutor down to about 1,100 cases as a result of that downturn, if you will. But as we move towards normalization and the response, we of course we would expect those numbers to go up. And if we take last year's number, with the infusion of these 3 prosecutors, it would drop us down to 867 cases per attorney if I take the lowest numbers that we have. But of course, you are right. As there is a fluctuation on the number of officers who respond to call, that has a direct correlation to the number of cases that are generated. So there is a direct correlation to law enforcement's response in the field and the number of cases that we will see.
Yeah, and that makes me wonder because if we're not having response times higher, we're not actually getting to the crime, the scene of the crime in time in order to catch an individual that's, you know, breaking the law. So that was my question is, and you answered that. That makes perfect sense to where we're at, because we've lost, you know, close to 90 officers over the past 18 months, and you see that go down because of that. So I appreciate that.
And I would just add one thing, which is when I speak to my counterparts from around the country, we have about a monthly meeting. There's also to keep in mind, because of reduced court operations, those cases are in the queue, if you
Flux.
will.
Yeah.
In the flux. So there's a bulge that's there. Now, when we talk about my counterparts nationally, we are looking at anywhere from 18 to 36 months to process that caseload, as well as the normalization occurs with the infusion of those cases. So, for example, in March of this year, our number of jury trials that were set were in excess of over 500 jury trials from the COVID backlog, not counting the new ones that are entering into the system. So I have genuine concern about how to manage it over the next 18 to 36 months of working those cases through the system in an efficient manner as well.
And then my follow-up question to you is in regards to jail time, how we get more jail beds. And I'm not saying that we need to, you know, incarcerate everybody, but those I've heard from our police officers that a lot of individuals are getting online every morning to see what the queue is in there and if they're a bed space or not. And they tell them, I'm going to be out, you know, no matter what, I'm not going to be, you know, put through the jail system. So my question is, with the county, with Sheriff Rosie, how is that working? Are we looking at more jail beds? Are you pushing for more?
No, I think that the question really becomes which ones we do want to send to jail, right? So, for example, high priority issues are really public safety issues, or somebody who is really, what I would say, and from a nonviolent perspective, really earned their way to want to get into jail by non-compliance, or some issue of special enforcement that we may want to look at. The typical cases that you're going to see at a misdemeanor level are going to be issues of DUI, domestic violence, assaultive behavior type of cases. And to the extent that we can not push everybody else into that who doesn't need to be there for nonviolent offenses, then I think that's sort of the approach that we've taken across the board in the criminal justice system. And we're doing that same thing at the DA's level. And we operationalize that during COVID times, which is those who are a risk to our community should be obviously incarcerated. But those who are not, we need to come up with other mechanisms of addressing that issue. Now, post-adjudication, certainly you can then start to do that by person's non-compliance, but it's a person who deserves to be there. So it's not just because by virtue of having a jail bed that we're going to just occupy it because we have a jail bed. The average daily count at the county jail, when COVID started, was about 2159. By us implementing smart strategies, we were able to reduce it down to about 1,300, as low as 1,100. It's hovering right now around 1,300 to 1,400 people, because we're trying to be mindful of those at-risk people to go in there. So that's the current capacity of the county jail.
And then my follow-up is, I know that a lot of them are like severe multiple offenders. They're just continually, or it's just a, open door that just keeps on circulating. What does the DA have to say with that, along with the county and the city, and making sure that that's not something that continually happens? I mean, it just seems like it's a rat wheel that we're just going around and around and around.
Yeah, I mean, I share your concern, and I think we want to be smart and targeted and surgical in using that punitive measure. So, for example, the first priority is obviously those who are a direct risk to the community, as well as direct victimization. Then the secondary thing is for us to explore the options of a supervised and supportive probation, and overwhelmingly, majority of the individuals will do that. Now, having said that, that does not mean that there aren't pressure points and also issues within our communities. So you can have somebody, I'll give you an example like this. By and large, stealing car theft is really a non-violent kind of an offense. But a person who's a prolific car thief who steals multiple cars, their collective impact has a violence upon the community in that broad sense of criminality, right? So that person who is a nuisance in a protracted way, then I think we can, and by having the virtue of having an empty jail bed when we prosecute that person, then we can say that there is value in removing this person out of the community, and there's a net gain for us to have. And we're committed to that kind of an approach. And that can be
Thanks.
misdemeanors, and that can be misdemeanors and felons.
Oh, I appreciate it. That's very helpful. This seems like the only time that I ever get to cue you on this stuff, and it's good for those that are following along to see and hear where we're at with the DA. So
I'm always available for lunch anytime you want, so we can talk.
yeah, I'll take you up on that so we can talk some more.
Absolutely.
Council members? Other questions? Sam, I have a couple of questions about your proposal for three new prosecutors. Do you have vacancies in the city attorney's part of the office right now?
Yes. So we have 13 direct. If we were to not add any new prosecutor, our sort of bench right now is 13 line prosecutors and Scott and Paige, who help with training, management, and all the other aspects that are tied to the running of the office. Right now, and we've been, I think, down as low as 6 attorneys, active attorneys, with a combination of people who have left because the market is changing, and also because people are on military leave. Right now, we are probably at the healthiest level in the last 7 or 8 months, and we're up to 10 line prosecutors. So we're currently down 3 prosecutors. So we have 3 vacancies that are there currently. And so yeah, please.
Sorry to interrupt, but so you have 3 vacancies right now.
Yes.
And my understanding from what you're saying is that at some point you were down
to almost 7
prosecutors. So it sounds like there's a lot of turnover, unfortunately, happening. And I'm not really sure what adding 3 more vacancies is going to do to help that situation. It sounds more to me that we need to be looking at retention of the attorneys that we have than adding more vacancies.
Okay, so that was a combination of military leave and also current market. So for example, if you look at it historically.
I mean, I understand that, Sim. What I'm not understanding is how we're adding 3 more vacancies is going to help the 10 attorneys with their caseload if we can't fill the other 3 vacancies that we already have. This seems to me to be more of a retention problem than it is a vacancy problem. If we can't keep the people that we have with the amount, I mean, if you're talking that we need that 6 new attorneys, but we can't keep the 3 that we have. And so I'm struggling at this point to be okay with adding 3 new positions when we can't keep the attorneys that we have. Now, minus the market and the military and whatever, I think the important conversation that needs to happen is, if there's a problem with the market that's going on, then what are we doing to ensure that we can have and retain, that we are a part of a competitive market? And you know, I don't really see in the proposal that was provided, and even with some of the questions that were provided and answers that were provided, that we're looking at this we're looking at it from more money for vacancies. And I am really struggling with that idea. I'm not saying that an attorney should have a 1,400 caseload. That's insane. And I'm an attorney. And so I understand that. But I really, can you talk to me about the retention that we're doing, the efforts that we're doing?
Absolutely. And Katie, please chime in from the city perspective. We have raised the issue with our partners there. My understanding is HR is working on that to adjust to the market to the best way that they can. There is a process that the city engages in that for that purpose. I am very grateful and hopeful as we move from HR that they're moving in the right direction. So to answer your question, you ask a very important and legitimate point, because there is a market component to that. And our dialogue with HR is that they're on it, and they are going to be supportive of that to address that issue. Katie, would you please as well?
I'd be happy to jump in on that. And what I'd say is, because this is a request for a reclassification of an entire group of employees, there is a more significant budget impact than reclassifying, let's say, one employee that then a department can carry that salary over the course of a full year. So I do think that council members, if you were interested in funding an across the board increase in reclassification for prosecutors, then you might want to think about one or two of these FTEs and ask HR to figure out what that number would be and transition the FTE into that reclass, so that we don't have a whole group of people who've gotten a raise, and then we have to come back to you and say, we've just been carrying that with our salary savings, but we actually need a budget amendment of X amount. So Council Chair, that would be an appropriate change, I think, if that's the direction you'd like to go.
And just so council members understand, that is the direction I'd like to go. I'd like to look at and have HR follow up with how much it would be to reclassify, be able to talk with Katie as the director of the department to what that looks like, and have some discussions on that, and maybe not fund all three of these FTEs, so that we can sort of move that over to, I mean, I know a lot of people that have left the city prosecutor's office, and just as we've been talking about, you know, how we have police leaving all the time, that it takes a lot of time and energy and money to train a new prosecutor or a new attorney, and to make sure that they're following the values of Salt Lake City and working within our justice court the way that we all want everybody to be working. And so for me, I really would want to look at maybe only funding one FTE and moving those other two FTEs over to creating a space where we can reclassify and give people a raise. And I'd like to look at the numbers on that. So just so the council members know, that's where I'm at right now. And then hopefully if we can reclassify, then we'll be able to fill the current 3 vacancies that we have. And if we were to fund one FTE, then we'd have 4 vacancies. But if we're reclassifying and making it a little bit more competitive for people, then we could fill that and help those attorneys that are there to lower their caseload. So that's what I'm thinking. I don't know what other council members, what your thoughts are at this point on that.
If I may just add one point. The last 4 that we had who left, their cited reason was the excessive workload. And I take your point. So first of all, thank you for addressing the market pay issue. And my point simply is that both through COVID and through the workload and other issues that have come up, we were at full staff. I mean, it's not like we've always had this vacancies in place. And so this is the situation we find ourselves in. And I would really ask that if you're going to make that change, I would ask that you at least let us have 2 prosecutors and at least a victim advocate, and take that one position for the reclassification component and work with HR. What we need to be able to communicate to our folks is there is some help that's coming. To not put too fine of a point, Mark Mathis, who's here with me, will tell you that we have actually leaned into Salt Lake County DA prosecutors to cover calendars because we didn't have enough bodies to do that, to be able to do our work. And given the bulge of cases that are there, given the workload that we already have existing, it is just a very untenable position for us to be in. But I take your point, Councilwoman Fowler, and I genuinely appreciate the desire to do a market response as well. So thank you.
Well, and I want to be clear that I think the victim advocate, when I'm talking about the one FTE, I'm talking about city prosecutors. The victim advocate is grant funded, and I think that that has shown to be, has, as you mentioned, probably helpful in kind of addressing some, at least taking some of the weight of the caseload off of some of the prosecutors. But again, it's just hard for me to keep adding vacancies when we have a problem with what seems to be the retention part of it. That's where my brain is just not, those two things are not connecting for me. And so I don't know, again, if council members have thoughts on any of this. Anna?
Some thoughts, because I don't like, I would like to understand how much time, if obviously if any, but I know Sim has spent some time talking about police reform and the things that we as a city can control and cannot control, especially after the protests and you know, and the cases last year that the police department encountered. And I remember that we talked about some things that we as a city can control and some things that are out of control in terms of the police department and the job description and the protocols that they need to follow when arresting somebody, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember Sim say, you know, Sim had some ideas that he wanted to take up to the legislature to help us resolve issues that we shouldn't have to be dealing with, like the police shouldn't be doing. So the question for me is, would this new FTs work on any of this at the legislature, at looking at our police reform, at looking at what are the do's and don'ts that should be clear cut in the book that they, you know, the protocol book that they need to follow because of the several litigation issues that we have at the city. Because if that's the case, I'm interested in you know, in looking at our system and fixing what we can fix in-house. And if his office can help us with it, then.
Can I, before Sim, you answer that, I think that, can Katie address that issue?
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So the council member Valdemoros, the city prosecutor's job is to prosecute crimes that are charged that are within a certain level of crime. So the DA, the district attorney, the county does, Sim, correct me if I'm wrong here, felonies and some misdemeanors, and the city prosecutor does all misdemeanors. Is that a pretty simple way of saying it?
Yes, from Class A's and felonies, the DA's office does. Infractions and misdemeanors below Class A are all within the province of the Salt Lake City Prosecutor's Office.
Thank you. So these FTEs are city employees that are prosecuting those misdemeanors and infractions. They're not doing the policy level work that Sim talked about and that is so important for us to do at the legislature. That would occur either as a city entity and really be part of the city attorneys and our conversations with our elected officials and our lobbyists, or at the county, the district attorney and those employees that are county employees who are doing that lobbying and legislative work on their behalf. It would not be the responsibility of these prosecutor FTEs.
Okay.
I can answer that. Thank you, Katie. What I can say is that in terms of the broader issue of reform within the criminal justice system, in terms of the charging of these individuals, It is tied directly to the number of people that we cite and we enforce those misdemeanor caseloads and their entry into the judicial process. There is some value to think about outside of the box at the rate with which some of these cases are enforcement action, and are there other alternatives that we can divert those cases so they don't enter into that system, and what that community response may look like as a part of the enforcement scheme. But Katie is right as to the macro policy issues. That's a city function. Then I have a responsibility as my role as the DA and the role that I play on that policy component vis-a-vis the city. Policy. I would never presume to go out and speak on behalf of the city for those larger policy issues, because there's a very qualified staff there to work on those issues on behalf of the city.
Okay, thank you for the clarification then.
Yeah, and I think to also on it to that point, as you remember, last year we had a legislative intent to have the city attorney's office go through our code, the city criminal code, and see what we could decriminalize so that it's not going into the city prosecutor's office. And as was mentioned the other day, there will be a couple of law students that are going to be working on that project. Thank you again, Katie. And then I think that is more of any policies that come out of that would be more for us and our lobbyists, the city lobbyists, to work on, not Sim's office. So, you know,
That's great. That's great. Thank you for the clarification.
Council members, do you have any other thoughts on on my thoughts? No? Okay, well, if we have nothing else, thank you, Sim. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Scott, for being here. Thank you, Mark. And I do just want to say another huge thank you to Katie and her office for the last 18 months of overtime, I'm sure, in just everything we've all been through, and how no matter what, you're right on the spot when any one of us have a question, and your team is always there. So thank you so much for that, Katie.
It's our pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, council members, we'll move on to item number 4, which is the IMS Department Budget. And sorry, let me pull up my agenda. We have Kira Luke from council staff, and Joseph Anthony, our IMS financial manager, Noel Walkingshaw, the deputy director, administrative services, Jason Struck, IMS chief information security officer, and Aaron Bentley, our IMS chief information officer. But first, excuse me, I will turn it over to Kira, and I may turn off my camera here for a minute, but I'm still here. Thanks, everyone. Go ahead, Kira. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, council members. So the IMS department is Information Management Services. They're most commonly associated with providing technical assistance, network security, hardware, and software for city departments. As technology needs in recent years have evolved, so has IMS's role in supporting city staff and connections to city constituents. Through budget amendments since the past fiscal year, IMS has expanded to include a new GIS division, which provides support for data collection, mapping, added the city civic engagement team previously housed in CAN. They're now part of the media services division, and created a new innovations team to help guide large citywide project implementations like the enterprise resource planning software. IMS also has a role in enacting the city's digital equity policy, which was adopted last year. The rate of this evolution, as you can imagine, has increased exponentially in the past year as many city departments transition to telework. IMS's proposed budget for this fiscal year is $19,215,550. That's a 14% increase since the previous fiscal year. The department's proposed budget is for a total of 84 employees. This includes a total of 15 new positions. Again, since the adopted budget of past fiscal year, 9 of those positions were added through budget amendments in the past year and covered in some the changes that I just discussed. This is one of the largest year-to-year employee increases for IMS in recent history. There have actually been concerns in the past that their staff wasn't increasing commensurately with the number of city staff they typically provide support to. You'll find policy questions on page 3 of the staff report covering topics like the staffing needs, network security, and digital equity. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to the Department Director, Aaron Bentley.
Thanks, Kara, and thanks, council members. What we have today is a brief slideshow that we want to go through with you. I also want to give you an opportunity to hear from Noah Walkinshaw, our Chief Innovation Officer. Part of this budget and part of Finance's budget is the ERP system, which his team is leading, and we wanted to have him give a brief update on that. And then finally, if time allows, I'd like to talk a little bit about the apprenticeship program and how that is worked out in our department and turn it over for questions. So if you could bring up our slideshow, and actually if we can skip to slide 3, that would be great, because Kira covered a lot of what we wanted to talk to. So if we can go to the next slide after this. And I'm not seeing it refresh yet, but maybe it's just me. The slide I wanted to reference was the Innovations Division, which Noel leads as our Chief Innovation Officer. When we talk about the 9 FTEs that have come to IMS, this is a general effort to centralize technology and information across the city. So these employees that came as part of this growth were employees that sat in different departments. As mentioned in the beginning, Noel was a Deputy Director of Public Services, but a long time had been working with myself and others on technology projects, on Google Fiber and all of these. So one of my requests when I met with the mayor early on in our conversations that we talked about was bringing on a Chief Innovation Officer and how well Noel will do at this. So if we can go to the next slide. So as Kira mentioned as well, for a long time, you've all worked with John Rand and his team, and they've worked a lot within the civic engagement team that was previously a part of community and neighborhoods. And so during the budget amendments this year, we centralized these teams who already worked together under IMS and under John as the division director so that they could better collaborate and better use the resources they have together. The other change in fiscal year was, as Kira mentioned, the Data Analytics and Geographic Information Systems Division. A longtime city employee for public utilities, Nick Krieger, filled a vacant position that we had and we reclassed as our Chief Data Officer and Chief Geographic Information Officer, and followed a long-time goal of we have had is having central data analytics and GIS. We can go to the next slide. And actually, let's skip to slide 6, which is perfectly fine. So when we talk about the key changes, we have our contractual increases. This is with all the software solutions we have contracts, and every year over year they increase. Technology and inflationary increases are $234,000. And if we can go to the next slide, these are kind of the requests that we have for this next year. As we've talked to council and mayor staff and department staff, we've realized that our city website really needs a lot of work done to it to be more usable, but also more accessible to diverse communities. And we'll be working on that with these enhancements and working with the departments and with your staff to do this. We've looked at language translation services and other similar options to get there. The big item there is the ERP system. This is just a portion of the funding that will be spread over a couple of years. And Noel will talk more about that shortly. If we can go to the next slide. Our base-to-base changes, and then this last piece is I wanted to outline the 6 FTEs requested. So the FTEs of the 15 that we talk about the growth, 9 of those were for, I would say, non-traditional IT jobs. So these 6 that are here, 5 of those represent traditional IT jobs. So the first is an ERP manager. that will continue on and help through this, that will have experience in the ERP solution, a cybersecurity engineer, a unified communication engineer, a data engineer, as we start bringing these systems together and try to drive data-driven decision-making across the city. This person will be responsible for meshing that data together and assisting departments so that they can be transparent in their data, but also use data collaborative. A network engineer for our backup and wireless systems. And then the last is a civic engagement specialist. As you may remember, Liz Bueller moved to the innovations team as part of the creation of that. And this is to fill her position and to assist with the demand that the civic engagement group has. And that's really the end of our slides. If it's all right, I'd like to turn the time over shortly to Noel Walkingshaw. I think he may have something he wants to display as well. But Noel, if you'd like to take it over, and then we'll be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I do have some slides. If we could start with the project overview slide. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the ERP project and what that means from the city. It's a project that, as you saw from the financial ask, it's a project that we need to take pretty seriously, right? It's one of those where we're making a big investment, and as such, we've tried to take a very structured approach to how we go about doing this project. And a big part of that was to do early work before making some of those big financial decisions. ERP is something by enterprise resource planning, by its title, doesn't really make a whole lot of sense sometimes. So we'll refer to it sometimes as PAM, people, assets, and money. It's a little easier, I think, to understand what we've done there. And what this does is it brings our human resources services into a common database. It brings our financial inventories and our financial services into the same place as our people. And then it brings also the information around our assets into a common place. And so it gives us a common data structure and to start working from, and it builds a lot of consistency that is really hard to have when you're trying to get a lot of different systems that were created over time to speak with each other. If you could scroll up just a little bit on this slide. Sorry, this is a long talk. To do this, we started with a team, and the team is really what makes this project work. We've gone with a very formal team structure in that we've developed sponsors, and we report to our sponsors, and we keep our sponsors informed of what's going on. It's Lisa Schaefer, Mary Beth Thompson, Deb Alexander, and Jen Bruno has been participating in this. They help us set the vision. They help us set the course of this project and help us with those resource decisions, because the resource decisions on this project are intense, and we need them throughout this project. They make or break this project through their involvement. We've then set up some smaller groups that we've been going through. We've set up a core leadership committee. Those are some of us that are just kind of working within all of the different pieces of it. And then we have a technology group, business process realignment, and organizational change. And I want to talk a little bit about business process realignment and organizational change, because those are two very important parts of this project. Modern services don't allow us to sort of translate how we've always done it into a computer. That's how we built our systems in the past, right? Someone sat down, said, well, how do you do your job? And we've created a system that did your job. The new systems have predefined a lot of this work. And so what it takes is us changing our ability to shift to those best business practices, those standard practices. And so we've gone through a process in this thus far where we've documented almost all of our existing human resources and financial practices. And we have those ready for the vendors that we're working with. That's given us a very good head start on this project. We also took our team through organizational change management training, because we know that we need to support the organization's shift to this new way of doing business. And that really makes or breaks the success of this, this project. It's not how great the system is, it's how well we're willing to use it. And that's what change management does. If you could go to the next slide, which is the existing tech. I want to talk about something else that we've done along the way. Is we've also contracted with an organization called GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association. And with that contract, what we're asking them to do is to support us in the contract, to be, they work in this space across the nation. They work with cities and counties and states bigger than us to help us make good decisions on our contract, to make sure that our statement of work is accurate and that we're minimizing change orders and we're really getting what we want. We've also asked them to help us with a rewrite of our chart of accounts. In the technical terms, a chart of accounts is known as the foundational data model. It's that foundation of the system that allows us to do all of that detailed reporting and getting into the weeds for developing budgets and to getting the information out of the system that we want. Our current chart of accounts has evolved over time, and it doesn't necessarily translate into a new system real well. So we need to go through that restructure of all of that information. We've asked them to help us with a business process alignment, to help us with, understanding that, yes, these changes in how we do procurement, these changes in how we do accounts payable, these changes in how we do certain elements of human resources are those industry best practices. And so we have a guide along the way, not just the technology support to make that happen. And then we've asked them to also help us with developing or supporting our policy review, the policies that are in place that may be tough to automate, and how we capture those and how we sort of document that stuff in the future, and how we, work to restructure some of that change so that we are successful. If I could go to that existing tech, that would be great. Oh, I'm sorry. It's a completely different PDF. Do you have that? I saw it in the tab. I think it's the furthest to the right. There you go. This gives you a little bit of a sample of where we're at. We have one solution, which is our primary financial system. And then we try to plug all of these different systems into it. One solution was implemented in 1993. Over time, we've developed a bunch of systems, and we've purchased a handful of systems. Some of them talk to each other, some of them don't. None of them are working on the same data structure. If we could go to the future state, please. I think it was the tab in the middle. Yeah. So you can see now the future enterprise planning system is that big target. We have all of those systems working in a common data structure. You will be able to pass through all of that different information for at a modern architecture with connections just to our departmental services like permitting or asset development, document management, CRM, things like that. And we will be able to cross and share information between those two pieces. I think lastly, we can close this. I just want to talk a little bit about the timeline so you understand the scope of that. We've taken a long time to get to where we are, and it is paying off because we know ourselves well and we prepared for this, because preparation for this project is super important. We are hopeful to have the contract in place by the end of this month, and we will be kicking that off. We will begin working with developing the human resources and payroll. Payroll is an area where we really need to do some work quickly. We're hoping and expecting, planning to have that work done in 12 months. About 6 months into that project, we will start on the core financial piece, and that itself will take about 12 months. So that will have the core financials, contracts, grants, and then analytic services that sit upon that. Throughout that process, we will be turning on things as they are ready. We're not going for the big bang where we wait till we get everything done and then we flip it on. Yeah, so that's about where we are. I've been trying to stay quiet trying to stay quick on this because I'm known to be an over talker. So I talk too much. So I'm open for questions on that.
Council members, are there any questions on this? And thank you, Noel and Aaron, for this presentation. And I'm looking forward to this ERP PAM magic.
Madam Chair, I just have a statement mainly, and that's, Noel, you think you talk too much because you dive into all the cool projects and you get to really do a lot of fixing. You're the fixer I've known for years and years. So I'm excited for what you're doing and everything that you've done in the past, because everything you do comes out as a win. So thanks for this.
Thanks. This is a big one for us, and I'm happy to do it.
Well, I don't see any questions from council members. Excuse me. So I thank you guys for your time today and for this presentation, and look forward to learning more and seeing all of this in action. Council members, at this time, there are a couple of us that need to take a quick break. And so mostly I do. For something. No, but Dennis has another little thing. So we're going to take probably just about a 15-minute break, since we're actually going through things pretty quickly. So let's all meet here at 3:15. Darren, I know you have a 3:15 thing, but we'll still meet at 3:15, come back at 3:15, and then you can pop back in when you're done with what you need to get done at 3:15. But
that's just fine. Everyone? Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you in 15. looks like we have a quorum. So I know that Darren will be back in a minute, and hopefully Dennis will be back in a minute, and I'm hoping that James is around here somewhere. So let's just go ahead and get started. Council members, we are on budget item number 5, which is our unresolved issues, and we have Jen Bruno here with us. And Jen, I know we sort of talked about how we wanted to tee this up. Do you want to start a little bit, and then we'll go from there?
Yeah, sure. So this is where we start actually straw polling and trying to balance the budget based on council member feedback and council member interests. So for the council's information, I forwarded the latest version of this spreadsheet at 12:55, I believe it was. And I'm ready to screen share if and when the council feels ready to go through kind of the different line items and discuss that. One thing that we were realizing as staff is there's so many different funding sources this year for things. And so one thing that we're thinking of from the council is if you could just give us some general guidance on what you're interested in funding. And we can have like a general sense of the order of magnitude, whether it's a small item or a big item, then staff can work and figure out which funding source or how that makes sense to fund. Some of the things are really simple and straightforward, and other things are a little bit more complicated, and so that's just one aspect. And Madam Chair, I don't know if you wanted to start and jump right in, or if you wanted to frame it a little more.
No, let's jump in, kids. I hope you all have your spreadsheets that are color coded, and Jen can explain some of the color coding. I do want to, I know that several of us have spoken and or shown interest in one of the suggestions that was made by Matrix, which is this civil service office idea of having a pilot program. I don't know why I always want to call it a co-pilot program. Anyway, so if I say that, I'm sorry. But, and I spoke to a couple of you on the phone about this idea, and I'm kind of calling it the alternative response model. And originally, I think that we had talked about, there was some money that wasn't going to be spent that was in the non-departmental area, and that was on Jen's spreadsheet from Tuesday. That was about a little over 600,000, and I had kind of thrown out this suggestion that maybe we put that in a holding account so that we can work on this this alternative response model. But I talked to Jen today, and I think what we could actually do is, based on our goals and our discussions and what we've told the public about our funding our future dollars, that, you know, this originally was for public safety, and I think the original intent was towards the police, and we've sort of expanded that a bit. And so we could potentially, what I'd like to do is, throwing this out there, is take from funding our future, take about $2 million and put it in a holding account for this model, this new model, so that we're ready to do a pilot program and we can fund it right away. The other thing I would want to tell council members is that I spoke with one of the REP commissioners, and they last night adopted their recommendations, and one of their recommendations is to look at this alternative response model. And so one of the ideas I had was that we sort of work with our staff, because at this point, we don't know where this pilot program would exist, like which office is best to handle it or something. So through working with Matrix, our staff, and the administration and the commissioners with the REP, they would kind of work together to say, what is the structure? How many FTEs would we need? Who would be housed there? Where's the best place for this department or this division or this office to be housed? and kind of work on that for a little bit before we do the pilot program. But then once that structure is kind of in place and we feel like we're ready to launch, we'd have this holding account money there to be able to launch the pilot program.
And Madam Chair,
So
just to clarify for council members, the Funding Our Future dollars that we identified were fund balance, technically, fund balance in Funding Our Future. This would mean that Funding Our Future fund balance would still be above the 14%, but that fund balance was a little bit higher. And so we noted that as the potential source. And I can't see people's videos, so. If people want
Yeah, council members, so what we thought about doing, this idea of putting this 2 million over in an account for this alternative response model pilot program frees up some other money for some of the other starred items that council members have brought up. And so what Jen and I had talked about doing and sort of how we could kind of frame this discussion is Jen will go through the council starred items and talk about those one by one. And I saw Cindy pop on. So Cindy, if there's something you'd like to mention.
Thanks. Just that I want to emphasize what Jennifer said. As we as staff went through this over the past few days and earlier today, it's I think if you spend a lot of time worrying about which source you're pulling your recommendation from, usually we need you to do that. But this year, because there's such a large number of sources, it's more important for us to hear which items you want to fund. And then so if for example, Council Chair Fowler just suggested using a source that you wanted to use for some other item, it might not matter because we can move a lot of the sources around. So don't let the source be the barrier. If you could just please focus on what you need to fund, then, and you guys can come to conclusions, then we will be able to take it from there, work with the administration, and then come back to you. So that's just an unusual suggestion. It's different than what we've done other years, but just we do have some unique situations this year with the varying array of funds sources.
Thank you, Cindy. And Jen, would it be helpful if when we are going line by line, if we kind of do a straw poll?
Yeah, to the extent that you feel comfortable doing that, I think that's always helpful because then staff can start that balancing process.
Okay, so Jen, if you want to go through those starred items, and then council members, as you all know, with the shared screen, it's hard for me to see everybody's tiles. So there's no need to raise your hand or ask questions, just please, or to ask permission. Please just go ahead and jump in if you have something to say or want to propose a straw poll on these items or things like that. We're pretty informal right now because we just really need to talk this out and get it done. So go ahead,
Madam Chair, do you want to do a straw poll on what you were just talking about? I mean, that's the first time.
I was actually just going to ask that if you guys wanted to straw poll that. That's a pretty big, that would be a pretty big help in terms of direction.
Sure.
I recommend a straw poll on Chairman Fowler's comments on this alternative response model pilot program. And I'd like to include some traffic enforcement in that whole study, but I propose a straw poll.
I'll make that note to specify that includes traffic enforcement. I think that's consistent with what staff was understanding. And normally we do straw polls, there's like thumbs up, and I'm scrolling through really quickly to see whose thumbs are up. But okay, I see everyone's thumbs. I don't know.
I have a question in regards to the traffic enforcement.
Yes.
You can put an individual who is not trained for these types of situations in extreme danger. So if we can make sure that if this is a study that's going out, that this type of questioning will be put out there for that. I don't ever want to see somebody that is not trained to do any sort of enforcement, traffic or otherwise, be put in a situation. I mean, you can get on YouTube and see these things and see, you know, it looks like it's a normal stop, but it does not end up being a normal stop. And that's not what these people are going to be trained to do. So I just want to make that perfectly clear.
Yeah. And in all cases, I think safety would be paramount, paramount of safety of the employees, safety of the public. Everyone's safety has to be at the top of the list. And the same is so with the social work questions that are being asked, how social workers are deployed and what works best in terms of what the administration is thinking and all of those things. So we can emphasize that in the language that we prepare, but I think everyone's thinking it anyway.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. It's just a concern for me because
Absolutely.
we have police officers that don't even have the equipment that they need to perform their jobs. So.
Well, I agree with you, James. Safety is paramount, and I think that's why it's important that we work with Matrix, who has seen this done in other cities and has some experience with that, as we and create this group that I'm suggesting that to make sure that all of those concerns are answered, and we're having a strong foundation to start with. So I'm 100% with you on that.
I'm on board, and I'm not trying to debunk this or put it on the back burners, but I still think that if we're looking at this too, we should look at see what type of equipment our officers don't have, and have Matrix look at that as well to make sure that they're equipped to have everything that they need.
Okay.
And that really was new information today. So, and Ben has already made the request for that information, the equipment question.
So I think I saw a straw poll from everyone except I think Councilmember Ferris joined in the middle, and then Councilmember Baldimoros. I think I didn't see.
I have a question, Jen, for you. On like, I'm confused about not in line. Let me see here. In line 111, 112, and then 113 and 114.
Right. Those are additional optional items that have come up from the council relating to the social worker program. And so these are not included in the budget unless the council adds them. I think that my intention was to go to those items next because they're related to this pilot program concept, but potentially separate in the immediate term. So in the immediate term, social workers might not be a part of this alternative response model. I think longer term, it's entirely possible that they are. And so I don't know if we want to go to those next, Madam Chair, and maybe after this straw poll.
Yeah, that's fine. So straw poll of the idea of the alternative response model, $2 million in a holding account. And we had I had a thumbs up from me, James, Dan, looks like Anna, I'm scrolling, Chris, and Dennis.
Great. So we'll add that. Sorry, getting my mouse over here.
And other clarification, sorry. So this is all, and I'm sorry if this is a repeat, this is all funding our future dollars?
Right, and I think that our intention would be to draft a legislative intent for the council, similar to the one that you guys adopted a couple of years ago, expanding the definition of public safety from funding our future. A couple of years ago, you expanded it to include fire. I think in this case, you could expand it to include traffic enforcement, non-emergent response, and social workers potentially. Dispatch, I think, might also be something to consider since that was actually in the mayor's recommended budget. We could just clarify that.
Yeah, I just want to, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, Councilmember Wharton, in case you were just still signing on when I said this, the sources, some of you are relying on the same sources for different proposals. And this
Yeah.
is one of the few years where the source is more flexible than usual. And so I don't think that you need to focus as much on the source as you do on what it is you'd like to fund. So, because you can go crazy trying to figure out who's doing which source. If you
Yeah.
can focus on what items you want to fund, then we're pretty confident that we can sort through with the administration what the best funding, which is the best funding source for each thing. So don't let it stand in your way that you had a source in mind, and someone else suggested it, because I think we can figure that out as our second step, if that's okay with you guys.
Yeah. And the one thing I just wanted to add is I totally agree with what James is saying. The last thing I want to do is like put people in danger, and I don't want to create an alternative, program where people are armed. And so I understand that there's issues there, but it's kind of, you add that to this sort of washing machine discussion that we've had ever since I've been on the council too, where neighbors are like, there's zero traffic enforcement in my neighborhood. Like no one even comes to issue tickets. And it's because we're like, well, officers are very expensive and all their equipment's expensive, and it's not the best use of taxpayer money to have officers out issuing tickets because it doesn't ever generate enough revenue. And like, so I keep kind of going back and forth between those two things and swirling all around. So if there's a way to make a program that can do that, I think that would fill so many needs in our city. But I do absolutely want to be sensitive to what I share James's concerns about safety.
And Chris, I know exactly where we could stick them where they could make the revenue, and that's in front of Staker Parsons with all the uncovered truckloads that come out of there.
That is absolutely true as well, and I'm hoping that we can address that at some point in this budget.
Great, thanks everyone. Jen, do you want to move on to the next items?
Yeah, so I think that maybe the one that makes sense to go to next is what Councilmember Baldemoros was asking about, and it's a grouping of items. And so I'll call the council's attention to lines 111 through 114. Different council members have expressed interest at adding a few more social workers, and then some council members have expressed an interest in dramatically expanding the program. And so we've included just a few options. We have a cost per month so that we can quickly adjust if there's a new option that council members are interested in. And then other council members have expressed an interest in that function, the CCC, being located outside of the public safety building. And so we've added a specific line item. It's a total placeholder amount. I'll just say that there's not a specific leasable space we have in mind that we calculated out. And so that amount could be too high or too low, but the administration could certainly come back in a budget amendment to clarify that. I think it also probably depends on how many social workers there are, probably determines how much space they need. So it felt like a little bit of a linked discussion. So with that, I'll open it to discussion.
Council members?
So just to clarify, the original, excuse me, the original budget had 6 social workers for 10 months and 3 for 6 months?
Three for 10 months and 3 for 6 months. So a total of 6 new social workers.
And this is for?
This would be in addition to what is proposed in the mayor's budget.
Okay, all right. And
yeah, sorry for didn't make that clear.
Yeah, just confirm.
And
Dan, I think, oh, sorry.
I'm in favor of adding the social workers. I think that program is a worthy cause, especially if we could use that with the MRT program that we kind of threw around when we were talking with Chief Lieb. Now, is it a full 6 do we need that, and we want to go all the way there at this time? Or is that overloading the program? I'm up for a discussion on that.
I guess if I could insert, sometimes we have a chicken and an egg problem where you're sort of waiting for the administrative staff folks to be prepared, ready to start a new program, and they're sort of waiting for you to say that you want the new program. And so really, this is one of the major centerpieces, I think, of what the council has been talking about in terms of changing the way that the part of the police systems function. So I think if it's your priority, you should fund it, so that, because your budget is what articulates your priority. And then the administration can come back with whatever adjustments they recommend, or that type of a thing. But what you're expressing in adopting your budget is your policy and budget priority. It's hard to explain to the general public that, well, we wanted to fund social workers, but they weren't ready. And the general public is not very accepting of that. It's, you're the city council, fund what it is you have as your highest priority. So that's just my suggestion to you.
Councilmember Martin?
Yeah, with that, I'm interested in funding the social workers, but I also realize that we're sort of reinventing this program to a certain degree. I mean, we're expanding it greatly. We've also talked about connecting it with the MRT, which is housed in the fire department, which is different than what they're currently doing, which is working with police officers housed in the police department. So I think there may be a lot of sort of adjustment that happens, but could we fund the FTEs in a way, maybe it's just a legislative intent that like these FTEs are to be alternative delivery people for services related to mental health and substance abuse. And then would it be easy enough if they were to come back and say, actually, we need only this number of social workers, but we need these 3 other people that we never really knew until we started doing this program that aren't necessarily social workers, but they have this other kind of training. Is that something, would just be a budget amendment, or I guess what I want to do is I want to fund this, and I want to do what Cindy just said, is earmarking this money as our council's priority, but also build in enough flexibility that if there's some other FTE that's needed that's not a social worker that we don't even understand, that they could come back and let us know about that.
Sure. And that's not difficult to do. We can come up with some language for you to look at, and we'll run it by the administration too. It would have to be FTEs listed in the staffing document, but there could be some flexibility, and we're already planning on flexibility because of the RPT group, REP. I said it wrong. Racial Equity and Policing Group.
I was going to say maybe one way to do it so that you're not hiring people and then having to not unhire them in order to change the position. I think you could put it in terms of having the administration report back to the council before hiring or before implementing. I don't know.
That's what I was going to suggest too, Jennifer. But another thing I feel like being part of the council that funded the social workers to begin with, and I fought actually not to have them in the police department, but eventually we did put them in, and now it looks like we're trying to put them out again. I think we need to be able to track and have that data to say, of the calls of these individuals that are in this ARP, is that what we're calling it, Amy? How many their calls, how many of them had to have police presence? You know, I think that is extremely important for us to know, for a data point, and knowing once they are implemented, when they are in calls, how many times are they on those calls having to call the police out to help them?
or maybe it's the police calling them. Either way, how often are they combined? And it might be every single time.
I thought that's what they said, that the phone calls,
Well,
when they are working from 8 to 5, that they go together.
They are currently co-responding, so they are responding to every call as a team. So it's kind of hard to say how many of them would actually require a backup call since the officer, sworn officer, is already there.
But again, I think to James's point, these are questions that can be addressed in that working group that I'm hoping happens to create the model, the alternative response model that we would work on, right? And I think, yeah, that's all.
I agree with you, Amy, and that's all I'm trying to make is I just want that point to be in that group when they discuss it.
And we can document that and make it part of the request.
And this goes also in line with the fire's medical response team, whether we can use them on that side of the house or just the police side of the house, because there's, as we discussed with Chief Lee. So I like that.
So I think at this point, we're kind of looking at, I guess the straw poll or the idea would be these that I'm hearing from Dan and Darren is this 6 more social workers for 10 months with the flexibility to adjust if needed. Is that accurate for people? Do they feel that is inaccurate for those people that said something? Dennis?
If I may, I think that's pretty darn close, yes. But the social worker system already exists in the CCC. They do need more social workers in that program regardless. So we can certainly use those social workers right away. And then, yeah, just be flexible and nimble so that we can adapt as we go on after we figure out what the new program might look like.
And I think that that's going to be a natural part of the conversation of that, for lack of a better word, that $2 million holding account, right? I think that there are aspects to so many different existing things in the city that could relate to that. So these are just my very basic words, but if any council members have other ideas for how to word that, and what we'll do is we'll include a legislative intent for your for your June 8th meeting to confirm that we've captured what you guys have in mind with this budget. And I think maybe the chair just went off screen, but I'm thinking that there was a straw poll request.
So I say we have I recommend a straw poll on that exact thing you just said, Jen.
I like that straw poll, and until I see, oh, there she is, Councilmember Fowler, Sheriff Fowler. I was going to take over. There you go, Amy.
James, you can always take over. Okay, we have this straw poll. If people can indicate their support, I've got me, Dan, Dennis, James, Anna, Chris, and Darren, all in support.
Thank you. And thank you, Madam Chair, for reading them off. It helps the city recorder.
Yes, of course.
So the other item linked to that is this lease space. And I don't know if the council if a majority of the council felt strongly about whether or not that function should be in these public safety building or a different location.
I think for me, council members, that this particular item is not really important for me right now because, again, we already have that co-responder model and it's working right now, and we don't want to disrupt that while we're kind of figuring out this other model. And when we figure out this other model, we may come back and say, yeah, they need office space or something, but that may come later. I mean, that might be like next year's budget even. Okay. That's my opinion. Okay. Other council members?
Madam Chair, I was also thinking in relation to that. It seems to me like right now the CCC is currently call it co-responder because they're responding to calls and less of a drop-in center for people to like show up. And then there's also the mental health receiving center that was funded, and I think is supposed to come online in the next year, right? Am I correct on that? So to me, it does seem like having them respond out of the PSB may be fine. So I think I'm with you on let's wait to see, unless we've received other direction from Director Waters or anyone else that I have missed, but it seems like it's maybe not necessary to me as well. So I think I'm with you on that.
One detail I can add, the state-funded receiving center is not supposed to open for another 2 years. There are multiple receiving centers on the way, including the new Huntsman Mental Health Center at the U of U campus, which is not open now and may also be 2 years away. And then there's another one in South Salt Lake, but it's relatively small and it's under construction.
So just to clarify, the one in South Salt Lake is the Huntsman Receiving Center, and they just broke ground within the last couple of weeks. It's going to be a while, so that's quite a ways out. And secondly, forgive me, but this is actually pretty important to me. The CCC does need a space of its own based on the mission that it is serving currently. I realize that may change drastically depending on what comes of this working group. But in the meantime, based on what they are doing, they do need to be separate. They are currently in the public safety building because just because of losing the lease and in the space that they were and where they were next door to the old road home. So they're just treading water right now in the PSB, and it has definitely impacted their services. Having the PSB close to the public entirely, and it certainly reduces access to them, but also just frankly, it's frightening for the population to be able to interact with their case managers. So I would very much prefer to move forward with leasing a separate space for them. And then that also allows to be able to place that somewhere in, like North Temple, somewhere on a high profile area that needs a little bit additional police presence, and as well as that social worker interaction with the population involved. So I'm strongly in favor of this.
Well, you've made a convincing argument, Dennis.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was convincing.
If you want to propose a straw poll, Dennis, then we can.
Can I ask one budget question first? So
Yes.
they previously had a leased space, which was just part of the police department's general budget. Was that
actually the leased space before was included in the CAN budget under the homeless services line item, and it was removed from the CAN budget because they were no longer leasing the space. There was kind of a chicken and an egg thing. The space went away, and so there was no longer a need to pay. And so rather than find, and I think there were discussions over this last year trying to find space, but those discussions never, and probably with COVID, were complicated.
Okay, so
but yes, there used to be a budget for lease for this.
And it's no longer, okay, got it.
It's no longer, so I think we still need to. I would propose a straw poll that we continue some amount budgeted for the lease space for the CCC to be able to operate in their current function.
I have another question. Does the city have any office space or a place that can be an office that we can use?
That was a question that our staff asked that we haven't had time to track down, that we haven't received an answer on and haven't had time to track down. I know that in the past they were even looking at the library. I think the library would still charge a lease, but you're right. If it was located in a city building, we wouldn't have to pay a lease.
Just a thought, the previous location for the Community Connection Center needed about $100,000 of renovations. So even if there is a city-owned property, it may need funding for renovations. So perhaps the funding for leasing and or renovations, so there's some built-in flexibility as an option.
And just we've received some new information from the administration that they did look at the library space and it's too small. And that if additional social workers are added, the public safety building will likely be too small as well.
So Dennis, and I have a question for Dennis. Can you briefly walk us through what the interaction is, or what the offices are with the office situation with the CCC, or how if somebody can go to the CCC? What happens? Like,
Right now, it's extremely difficult to access them. They are currently located within the PSB, which is closed to the public due to COVID. If you have an appointment and you are comfortable with approaching the police department and all that entails, that can be a scary space for a lot of the people that the CCC social workers are very specifically trying to help. Now, they have gone away from the vast majority of their drop-in services, but they still very often have to deal with issues with the clients. Whether it's if you're trying to get them, if they've lost their birth certificate and you're trying to do the paperwork, you need to go back to the office and get in front of a computer and start sending emails, or filling out the forms to be able to ship those out. All of that takes a space, and a space that you certainly have a much better chance of doing that effectively if the client is comfortable in that space, and having it in the public safety building that is behind locked doors and with so many people in uniform surrounding you, it can be intimidating. So yeah, I don't know, did that answer your question, Anna? Sorry.
Yeah, it does a little bit, but also, and I'm not sure if you call them clients or patients, or in the nonprofit world you call them clients, I think.
Yeah, we usually go with client.
The people that you help. So these clients that visit the CCC group these are walk-ins, and so somebody that might be homeless or not can go to the CCC and say, hey, I need help with my birth certificate. I don't have any documentation. I've been having issues and I don't know what to do. Or how does it work?
It's possible, but it's not their primary focus right now. They have switched to the co-responder model, so that instead of hanging out in the office waiting for people to come to them, they're frankly in the cars with the sworn officers responding to calls to be able to deal with the issues, de-escalate the situation in that moment, and then continue with ongoing case management with those people, hopefully, to be able to help them out with whatever issues they've got going on.
Okay. All right.
So, but the possibility should still remain for a drop-in service, but it's not their primary focus.
Okay.
So, Madam Chair, I have a suggestion for this. We have a real estate guru, and his mind just escaped me. I would just say that what was that? Dan Rip, thank you. If we would just throw it at Dan and let him talk to them and come back with a scenario, I think us going back and forth doesn't help. So,
yeah. And my understanding is that they have, and there was nothing adequate, but yeah, by all means confirm.
I think, yes, James, thank you. I think the question here is, do we support the funding of it, where a building is, if there's a building, if we have to, figure out more space on the moon, I think is not necessarily for us to answer at this point. The question is, do we allocate money towards something like that, even if it at this point may not be quite enough and they would have to come back for it? It's showing an intent that we are allocating money for a building. So I think that is the question at hand. If you are in support of funding a building of some sort, please show your thumb.
I see.
I am a yes. I'll do it, Jen. It's okay.
Okay.
Dennis is a yes. James is a yes. Anna is a yes. Chris is a yes. Dan is a yes. And Darren is a yes.
Only because of Dennis's speech.
Yep.
Good job.
But also make sure, Jen, it says, like Ben said, if we could put some flexibility there, that could be for lease or for repairs of an existing city building. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification.
Thank you all.
And I realized the typo, so apologies for that. Let's see. Okay, the last item relating to this general topic in non-departmental is some council members have expressed an interest in expanding the visibility, if you will, and analytical properties of the existing body camera footage by using some of the technology that's offered by the by the contractor that we contract with for body camera services. There are, I know just enough about it to not know much, and so I'll rely on my colleagues to pipe in if I'm not explaining this correctly, but like speech recognition, situational recognition, things like that. I don't know if Ben or Kira or Cindy want to pop in and explain more, but there was a menu of items and the total was about $350,000.
I can speak to it more if there's interest, but Jen's correct. It is a package deal. The police department said they're interested in 4 of the software items, but providing them individually is more expensive than just buying the package.
Council members, thoughts on this?
Madam Chair, I think to the extent that I know, which is probably less than Jen, I think this is really powerful. And it seems like it's a way to use body camera footage to, in a way that is effective, could be colorblind, I think, because we're analyzing words and we're analyzing situations not through a computer, not a person. So I think it's a really good way for us to create better transparency and accountability. So I'm supportive of this.
Other council members?
And I'm assuming that this is going to make the process a lot more efficient too, and less time consuming from someone who has to gather and research that data from the body camera. So it should have a couple improvements in there. And is that true, Ben? It's going to be less time consuming for someone to look at that data?
Like as an audit?
Yeah, as an audit, yeah. How it's gathered.
That's correct. It does have savings and operational efficiencies for auditing of the body camera videos. For example, you can identify specific keywords and phrases that will be identified in the transcription service of the camera video. If the keyword is pinged for that video, such as an expletive or a certain derogatory term, then that video is prioritized in the list of all the thousands of videos. So a supervisor can quickly see which videos are prioritized at the top of the list. That's just one example.
Yeah. And
that's interesting.
Yeah, I would also say though that while it's more efficient and it's more, there's more transparency associated with it, it isn't like it'll save staff, it'll free up staff positions or anything like that, because at the same time you're investing in this, we've also been implementing the body cam ordinance, and that comes with requirements that a certain number of videos per month be reviewed. So that will take some staff resources. So you get from this really more transparency, a quicker turnaround of the video coming to the elected officials, more efficiency in a lot of ways. But I wouldn't want you to leave the conversation thinking it'll take less personnel, because that isn't a consequence of this. You'll have a lot more information, and it'll be better information.
Yeah. Thank you, Cindy. Council members, any other discussion on this? I believe that I'm going to take Darren's as a straw poll that he's in support of this.
Be great. Yes, I'll propose a straw poll that we support the funding of the Axon body camera services.
Great. Indicate by the use of your thumb how you feel about this. I'm a yes. Darren's a yes. Dan's a yes. Anna's a yes. Chris is a yes. Dennis is a yes. I believe James is a yes.
James's dog is a yes.
James's dog is a yes. Okay, that's everybody.
Okay. Thank you. And I think that's it for that item. So scrolling up, these are some, let's see, maybe I'll come to these at the end. These are some items that are new, sort of things that were discovered in the last little bit. So I'll go to the next item that was started by the council, which is to increase compensation for employees. Some council members expressed an interest in increasing compensation for represented. I think at this point we can just talk about it generally, and then as negotiations are still ongoing. So this is an amount for each 1% increase.
Jen, I'm going to interrupt you real quick. Council members, as you know, we do have a closed session at 4:45, and there will be a little bit more information because of the negotiations and the need for, that is one of the reasons we can have a closed session. And so I just wanted to clarify that we are doing that at 4:45. So if there's questions on that those particular like represented employees, that will likely be answered at the 4:45 closed session meeting.
Madam Chair, to that point, we can come back to that item if you'd like.
I think that maybe after, also council members, we have a hard stop at 5 or 5:15. I'd like to stop at 5 if we can. So we will have another chance for unresolved issues. The more we get through, I think today, the better, obviously. But that compensation one may be something that we come back to at the June 8th meeting, Jen, just so that we have time to get some of those other questions answered and everybody's on the same page.
Great. So I'll move on to the next item, which is an interest in funding additional Class C dollars. One item that, or sorry, not Class C, additional CIP dollars.
I'm so confused, Jen. I was like, I don't think we can do
one of the sources is recapturing old Class C funds that were not expended. So if you scroll up to the very top of the spreadsheet, you'll see $208,000 for completed Class C projects. We have an exact amount on that now that's, I think, slightly different than exactly.
Council members, that's at line 15.
I'm just trying not to like cause people to get sick by zooming back and forth on the spreadsheet. One other thing that our staff wanted to note is that the council took a straw poll early on in budget discussions to dedicate, and I'm highlighting it here, $1.8 million that had been sitting in the transportation holding account within Funding Our Future. The council had taken a straw poll to dedicate that to completing improvements on the 600 North corridor. I should note that there's also funds proposed in the $50 million proposed bond that the council is going to be discussing later this summer. But those dollars that are proposed in the bond are not sufficient to complete the entire project. And so this would help get the project a longer way there. We initially were kind of separating the issues, but realized that those are CIP dollars too. And so you could count those essentially towards your goal of 7%. And so before, when we had this 2.7 million is what you need to add to get CIP to 7%. If you wanted to count that, the funds for the 6 North corridor, you could add $1 million and get yourself to 7%, but it's of course totally up to the council, and probably how much you put into CIP depends on what projects you want to accomplish in CIP. And so any of those strategies is on the table for the council to consider.
Jen, remind me, oh, never mind. I remembered the answer. Council members?
So I'm interested in increasing the CIP, and I am interested in increasing the funding for the constituent CIP programs. I don't want us to nail down exact programs because that's what we do in the August timeframe. But I am interested in increasing the money going to there. But I'm kind of looking at, I'd like to keep the 1.8 for the 600 North corridor separate from the other CIPs. If that's doable, and I know that would only give us, if you separate that out, you'd have like almost $1 million just to go to the constituents if you want to keep it at 7%. Is that how? Am I reading that right accurately?
Yeah, we were just thinking about it from a calculation perspective. If you wanted to, it's not that those dollars, that 1.8 million, would be competing with other constituent projects. It would mean that instead of $2.7 million going towards more projects, you would have $1-ish million going towards projects. So that's definitely a consideration.
Because I look at some of those constituent programs and back to, priorities of street safety, health of the neighborhoods, different things, and that could be part of our priorities. If it and we'll scope it there. We don't want to earmark it for specific programs, just in general. And if we don't use it all, we don't use it all.
So Dukes, if it makes you feel a lot more comfortable about the 600 North and leaving the money there and counting it as a CIP, it has gone out to the neighborhood. It's been involved. Neighborhoods, the constituents have been 100% involved with the outlay, the progress of it. So
and yeah, I mean, it really is it fundamentally is a safety project.
Yeah, and I'm good with keeping that separate from the other 2.7. Yeah, I want to keep it by itself.
You just want to keep on adding to it. I see what you're saying, Dukes.
Yeah. So if you needed a straw poll, I'd say straw poll the 600 North by itself, and then the other one would be separate.
I think I could be wrong. I think the council already straw polled the 6 North.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that was one of those unique sort of early on in the process decisions.
Yeah, James brought it up pretty early on, and we all straw polled it. So that 1.8 is dedicated to the 600 North project. I think the question here is, do we want to increase the CIP fund? And again, going back to what Cindy said, I don't think we need to worry about where it is coming from. That's what our beautiful staff that doesn't sleep figures out. But just rather, if yes, and if so, yes, how much? And Jen and Cindy can correct me if I'm wrong about that, about kind of posing that question.
Yeah, exactly. And I think if you don't mind, the larger budget items like this, and even the holding account that you did, they may be sort of starred in very light ink, so that because as you guys narrow down and look for your common ground, you may have to tweak those larger budget items a little bit in order to get to the budget and balancing everything out. So the aspiration on the bigger projects, we hear you're telling us what your aspiration is, and it may actually be absolutely what a majority of you want to do, but we'll still come back to you to say, these are, like, if you have 5 things left that aren't funded, do you want to go back to any of the really big, heavy funded projects and consider ratcheting them back slightly in order to fund more things? So.
Right, like the 2 million holding account may end up being 1.6 or something if need be. But I think, again, the question going back to, do we want to increase CIP, and if so, to what? And I want to increase CIP. I don't know that based on the mayor's discussion and understanding sort of the limited capacity potentially, or the work that's on people's plates. I don't know if I want to go all the way up to the 7%. I'm not sure. I haven't figured out how I feel about that. So what are other council members' thoughts?
So my thought is that you put it at the 2.7 level, and then when we come to the August timeframe, because some of these projects may not need as much engineering support, and we go, hey, we have that level here. We don't have the staff to compete that level. We'll back it off from that point. But throw it out there now, because I don't know if it's 2 million, 1 million, 2.7 million.
Okay.
And I don't think the engineers probably know that either. So throw that out now and then back off if we have to.
Okay,
Darren? Is that doable?
I mean, I guess my question was the exact opposite of Dan's, is if we don't, and once we get to August and we actually discuss those, can't we just do a budget amendment to increase them? It would be the same process, right? To just say, because to me, it's probably going to be coming from fund balance if it's capital improvement projects. So if we find out that, hey, yeah, there is staff capacity to do more, then we just increase it at that time. So either way, I guess, so I am interested in doing as much CIP as we can afford and as our staff can manage, because I think that we have a backlog of things that need to be done and that will help the community. So yes, I want to increase it, but it seems like to some degree, we're going to have to right size the number in August. So it seems largely symbolic what number we choose right now, because we're going to have to get into the weeds in August about what staff can actually do. At least that's the way I'm analyzing it.
Yeah, I understand that too. Sometimes I wonder, is it better to have the money set aside up front instead of asking for it later on? So we have it up front, so it's not being used up or
yeah, procedurally we don't have a budget amendment scheduled alongside CIP, and so from a procedural perspective, if you wanted to fund more projects, it would likely be separated from your CIP discussion. And that's just purely logistical, procedural. And so to Councilmember Dugan's point, even though it is the same process and it is ultimately the same dollars from fund balance, you're right, especially this year, we're totally balancing the budget on one-time money like that. It procedurally is easier to have the money there and not spend it versus coming back and asking for it, but that's totally up to you guys.
I'm with Dan. I think it's best to plan for it now. The list is long and there's some projects that are unfunded or are less funded than what they need. And with construction costs, I'm with Dan Dugan. Let's set aside now.
And Anna, is your opinion to go up to the 7%?
Dan says, yeah.
Chris, is that do we have a straw poll here?
Yes.
So I guess my straw poll.
Wait, hold on, Deb. Does anybody want to say anything else about it before there's a straw poll? Chris, did you want to chime in?
I was just going to propose the straw poll to fund it at 7%.
Okay. Any discussion on that straw poll? Thank you, Chris. Okay, show your thumbs. I'm a yes.
Sorry, I have a discussion item on this. Can I do like a yes, I want to do this, but if we have to start balancing things, like this is something that I would be okay going to like 6.5.
Oh, that'll come up later.
We just say yes. Okay, I'll just say yes.
You can bring that up when we need to start balancing things and people and are hashing at other people's things. That's when the gloves come out, Darren.
I'll save it for then.
Okay, so show your support or non-support. I've got me, James, Darren, Chris, Dan, Anna, and Dennis.
Yeah, and we do that every year where we straw poll stuff and we have to revisit it. So, but we have to start making decisions and moving towards something. So, and the only way to do that is to vote on or straw poll.
Well, and it gives staff an opportunity to know what in the world we're all thinking, instead of just creatively reading our minds, which they are very, very good at. But hi, Madam Mayor, I didn't see you, so because we have the spreadsheet and I can't see tiles, and I didn't welcome you earlier. So welcome and thank you for being here. It's good to see you. All right, Jen, what's next?
So the next item that some council members have asked about is implementing the dispatchers earlier in the fiscal year. Right now, the proposal is to fund for 6 months the pilot program. And so if the council wanted to fund for the full year, it would you would need to add that same amount.
Discussion, council members? Let's just straw poll it. If you're in favor of funding for the whole year, show your thumb either way. If not, whatever. I'm a yes, Chris is a yes, James is a yes.
May I ask a question?
Dan is a yes. Go ahead, Darren. Or Dennis. Dennis. Sorry. Sorry.
The other day. What was the original intent of this program? Was it to be a temporary fix or a more permanent?
I think this is a more permanent fix to allow
A 32-hour work week for dispatchers in an attempt to help with turnover and morale. And just the interest from the council member was that because in the discussion of like this new pilot program, it may include dispatch and it may include asking them to do a lot more. Having that capacity start earlier in the year might be helpful.
Okay, so I just want to be clear that we are prepared generally to do this indefinitely.
Well,
Awesome.
I am wondering though if it was actually proposed as a pilot program.
I think the former director proposed it as a pilot program, recognizing that even good ideas have unintended consequences and kind of reserving the right to adjust if the unintended consequences were detrimental. But I think that that's true with almost anything in the budget. So you could call everything in the budget a pilot if you really wanted to.
Okay. Darren, did you have a question at all? Okay, so I'm going back to the straw poll. Raise your thumbs again so I can make sure the record is clear. I'm a yes, Dennis is a yes, Chris is a yes, James is a yes, Darren is a yes, Anna's a yes, Dan's a yes.
Okay. And I'm just putting that in as a placeholder and funding our future, but you guys don't need to worry about that. That'll be kind of what Cindy was mentioning of us figuring out where things belong. The next items that were starred, one item that staff identified after the last council discussion and based on recent discussions at the state level about drought and banning of fireworks, although I haven't seen if the governor's made an official announcement. There is a line item in the public services budget for fireworks. And I don't know if they were planning on not having fireworks anyway because of the drought conditions, but that was a line item that we identified if the council wanted to recapture those dollars.
In not having like a city-sponsored fireworks show.
Right. One council member pointed out that it does not prevent private parties from doing their own ill-advised fireworks shows.
Does it actually like encourage people to do their own less controlled fireworks shows? I don't know.
Yeah. And we realize it's not a popular suggestion. It wouldn't cause you to win any popularity contest.
And it's pretty small peanuts as it relates to the budget. So we can zero that out for sure.
But all of those private fireworks shows would contribute to the economic development by injecting that funding into the local economy, right?
When I meant private fireworks shows, I meant people's driveways.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, all those people.
People buying those fireworks.
Those ill-advised.
Got it.
Indeed.
So
are we buy that one?
Yeah. I mean, I'm happy to put 25,000 back in the general fund by not having fireworks, but
I personally love fireworks and I am okay getting rid of this. I think that we can do more with 25,000 than fireworks. So
okay.
There's a straw poll. Everybody.
Madam Chair, I love fireworks. I love fireworks as well. And if you just look to the west of the valley, you'll see all the illegal fireworks that go off. It doesn't really happen on the east side, but on the west side, it is crazy. So, yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay, thumbs. I'm gonna go through my.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to support my fellow council members. I also love the fireworks. It's an awesome thing that we used to do, but we do have the drought. I mean, even the governor's just called for a statewide prayer for water this weekend. I mean, that's the severity of the drought that we're having. So yeah, I'm okay with taking this away for this year at the very least. Thanks.
Okay, just for the record, everybody said yes.
Okay, unanimous. Thank you, Recorder. The next two items that were starred by the council during the initial discussions.
Say no to the fireworks.
Huh?
No to recapturing.
Correct.
Okay. So
Sorry,
everyone but
but Darren. Sorry, Darren.
Thank you.
Thanks for clarifying that. Sorry about that. These were starred because they're not eligible for ARPA dollars, but some council members expressed an interest in funding them. It's one FTE related to urban forest preservation and growth, and one-time funds related to the same thing. So those two line items, council members requested more discussion on.
Well, council members who want to discuss it?
Chair, I think that we already hired I know we're moving something, but in the urban forestry, right? Oh, it's forest preservation and growth. We've already done, I believe, a whole new crew for urban forestry because we were so far behind. And I just think the budget right now, if we start looking at it, we're going to be super tight. So even with, that is not eligible for ARPA. So I'd say we just hold off on this until we actually, because we're going to have to pull stuff no matter what. And I would rather see we pull this one now than later.
You want to pull it now, James?
Be my suggestion.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you on that. Chris?
Just a question. Does this, I assume that this is not needed to do the 1,000 trees per year on the west side, we're already able to do that with the capacity that we had last year. Is that right?
I saw Kristen Riker pop on for a second. Maybe she can answer that. There we go.
Thanks, Allison. Yeah, this is actually a needed position for the 1,000 Tree Program. The 1,000 Tree Program needs to have somebody available to do the planning, to understand where those trees can be planted within our city and work with the communities to plant those trees. We have done it without this position, and we will continue to do it without this position. It is stretching our urban forestry crews very much, and we will need this position. But I've talked to Tony about this, and Tony will make it happen, but this is definitely a needed position. The other role that this position would play is to review construction documents and to do site inspections for trees and to bolster tree protection in the city. So it's really a dual role for planning where trees will be planted and the site inspections.
I appreciate that. That's extremely helpful, but it's still, for me, imagine where Tony would be if we hadn't hired the other urban foresters. So I think we can move forward this year without it, with all the problems that we're having in regards to police and social workers. And just for me, Madam Chair, that's where I'm at.
Thank you, James. Other discussion by council members?
And James, you're talking about all 315,000, both line items. Okay.
And just to clarify, this is one of the 4 proposed new FTEs for Parks Division, correct?
No, this is not. This is separate.
Yes, this is separate. Yeah. Those other FTEs are now listed each line item, and those are above.
Okay.
And if I could just add the added arborists that were added, I believe it was 2 years ago. Those are folks that are up in the tree doing pruning, and they are not doing the planning or the site inspections or the construction document reviews. So they're very different positions.
Okay. Well, I think that James, if there's other discussion by council members, what I'm hearing is James having a straw poll to pull this item from the budget, these 2 line items from the budget.
And just to clarify, like semantics, they're not currently in the budget because they're not eligible for ARPA dollars. We starred them to add them to the general fund budget. So
the straw poll would be that we not add them to the budget. Is that accurate, James?
That is accurate. And it's not that I don't support it. It's just that funding is tight, and this is a general fund subsidy. So I'm not looking for that right now.
Okay. Council members, show your opinion through your thumb. I've got me, Dennis, Dan, James, Chris. Anna hasn't voted yet. Oh, Anna, and then Darren is a no. So,
Okay.
Everyone but Darren.
Thank you. And I'll just keep scrolling up. No council members asked to start any of those additional FTEs in the Public Lands Department, so I am scrolling past that. The next FTE that was starred was a business analyst that was a gray area for potential funding through ARPA, most likely ineligible. I think council members asked to star it given the workload that finance is facing. So,
Jen,
I should clarify that's for 10 months. All right,
Jen,
so that might be full year.
I'm sorry, I have a question on the public services FTEs. So those are not currently in the budget. None of those are currently in the budget?
Sorry, I realize that this sheet kind of mushes everything together. So I'll clarify. All of these FTEs are in the budget. So where it says new, those are FTEs that were proposed by the mayor and are in the budget unless the council takes action.
Got it. And so if it were starred, it would be to take out of the budget.
Right.
It would go into that column like we did with the other ones. Okay, I just wanted to understand. We can go back to the business analyst.
Okay. And so for this one, because it was in the ARPA funding and because it was not eligible, it's not in the budget unless the council adds it into the budget.
Got it. Council members, discussions on this?
Can you tell me
Yeah,
what
Madam.
line this one's on?
Line 53.
47, 53.
And I'm
Are we doing-
realizing I wonder if I added a line after I emailed you guys. So it is line 53 for you guys and me. That's good.
James, what were you going to say?
Are we going up or down on these?
We are scrolling up.
So we're
What do
going to
you
go 53, 52, 51
Right.
on all of these.
Yeah.
I'm not planning on going line by line. I'm planning on hitting each of the highlighted items that the council asked to highlight. But if there's anything that you would like to talk about that we don't have highlighted, please jump in.
Oh, no. If we don't need to talk about it now, we can talk about it later. I'd rather not be the bearer of bad news on, 2 different nights. So.
Yay.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
one question that we asked the administration yesterday, and they may have gotten back to us, but I haven't seen it yet. Just informally, we asked whether either of these analysts in finance, Mary Beth said that she might be able to do with one instead of two, but then we realized that we're calling on finance to do a lot right now because of the ERP citywide monetary accounting stuff and the police zero-based budget and all of the federal funding that's flowing through both there and CAN division. So I don't know if they can just share an answer with us. It may not be a problem, but we just got worried because what they're doing is so central to those projects.
Thank you, Cindy. Council members, any discussion on this one? Also, if people want more time, we can skip it. We have another day to talk about unresolved issues. And so we don't have to, I appreciate everybody wanting to get through these. I really, really do. I think this is productive, but feel free to say, hey, let's skip this one. And I'm okay with that. Or if somebody has a straw poll or discussion, either way. Chris?
I'm almost okay with skipping it and seeing where we flow out on the other ones.
Okay, Chris?
So we were waiting to hear back from Mary Beth, correct? And whether or not we needed, whether or not she could do with one. Earlier when she said she could do with one, then maybe she can't. What was the conclusion of that conversation?
We don't know. We asked the mayor's office if they could just double check that for us. So.
Okay. So I would be in favor of skipping that and coming back. I do want to have a conversation though about parks, and I don't remember if Jen said that we were skipping public utilities or if we were skipping public services. So
We skipped through public services and public lands because we didn't have any council members say they wanted to stop there, but we can certainly go back. Public utilities, we don't have listed on this specifically because it's not general fund balancing, but if there's an issue, an unresolved issue relating to public utilities that you want to discuss, we can do that too.
Yeah, I don't know what I like. I don't want to say flag the whole division for parks, but I do because I want to know what people think since the presentation and since we've had time to think about it. And so I don't know if we want to have that discussion today or if we want to have it next time, give people time to come and prepare, but I think we need to, I don't know where all my colleagues are on this, and I want to hear what people's thoughts are. Okay, so I want to have that conversation.
Chris, I'm fine with having that conversation today. I'm not looking at starting in a new department at all. I just don't think this year is the way to do it, specifically when we're looking at, fixing all departments that are already in a wreck. So I'm afraid we're not going to have the budget. It's going to be a shortfall when we're coming to it, whether the ARPA funding comes through and we put it in a holding account and say we're going to look at it later. Let's not do that. Let's actually have an outreach to the individuals and to the community to talk about that. I don't think we're doing that. And I know that's what we were elected to do, and I'm more than willing to do that. But right now, trying to ramrod it through and we don't even have a clear picture of what it's going to look like. So plus we're already looking at a new trial coming up with a program that the ARP, is that what we're calling it, Amy? I keep on messing it up. Is it ARM or is it ARP?
It's ARM.
These TLAs are really messing me up, So, and I would actually suggest that unless there is a council member that is wanting to look at these employees instead of going it up by line, that you come back and say, I want to talk about this one, because otherwise I say we scrap them all.
I think Dennis might have some opinions on this. Dennis, do you want to chime in at all?
Is it my turn? All right. I'm in favor of the FTEs for public lands. Being a founding member of the Parks, Natural Lands, Urban Forest, and Trails Board some 8 years ago or so, our current Parks Department deals with a vast amount of open space and green space within our city. The complaints that we have consistently regarding either low levels of maintenance or slow response times. I know Councilmember Rogers has mentioned Redwood Meadows Park. Things like this definitely can't happen without enough staff to do it. And Parks has been operating at a serious detriment in relation to certainly other cities our size. We operate currently at significantly less than a comparable city like Boise. Of factors of 10, it's insane. The amount of maintenance that should be done in spaces like the Jordan River Trail to have that beautiful string of pearls running through our city that we would love to be able to be proud of. To maintain every park to the same status as Liberty Park would be fantastic. With what we are also going to discuss regarding turning the Glendale Water Park into some sort of regional park, possibly. There are so many new projects on the board. If you look at your CIP books, there are a ton of parks projects in there because green space is extremely important to all of our constituents. I think that the Parks Department in general has been so understaffed and under-resourced for so long that these are absolutely essential.
No, I agree with you, Council Member, 100%.
One more quick thing, James.
Except for when it comes to Redwood Meadows Park. That was not a staffing issue. That was a problem that started and was not finished. It had nothing to do with staffing. It went out to contract. It had nothing to do with individuals, but the ineptability of finishing the park.
Okay. As far as elevating it to, as far as elevating it to department status, I'm indifferent. I'm not necessarily in favor there, but I love the employees.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes, 1 second. Sorry. Council members, we have a pretty hard stop at 4:45. Not pretty hard. It is a hard stop to get into our closed session at 4:45. And what I'd ideally like to do, we did a lot on our unresolved issues. I think that this parks issue is a little bit longer discussion than 4 minutes, 6 minutes. And I would really, since we're on a Thursday, and I'd really like to just end after our closed session. And I would hope that you guys would understand that, and that we maybe talk in small groups about the parks and get some ideas there, and then talk about it again on Tuesday. So Darren, I know that you wanted to say something, but if that's okay with everyone, I'd like to just be able to end this meeting at the end of our closed session. Is that okay? Okay. So with that, and I just have a feeling this parks thing is going to be a fun discussion. So I want to give it ample, beautiful time. With that, I don't have my agenda in front of me, but I don't think there is anything else on it. Is there any announcements or anything at this point? Cindy Lou? Cindy Lou. This is where my brain is right now. Okay, then in that case, I would ask for a motion to go into closed session. And Katie, can you please give us the language necessary?
It's a motion to enter closed session to discuss collective bargaining and receive advice of counsel. And you can also say, there you go, exactly.
Second.
All right, I have a motion by Councilmember Rogers and a second, I believe, by Councilmember Wharton. I will go ahead and roll call this. Councilmember Rogers.
Yes.
Councilmember Mono.
Yes.
Councilmember Valdemoros.
Yes.
Councilmember Dugan.
Yes.
Councilmember Ferris.
Yes.
Councilmember Wharton.
Yes, but do we get a 5-minute break in between?
Yes, you can.
Okay, thank you.
And so we will enter into closed session in 5 minutes. Bye.
And Madam Chair, it would help clarify for the public that you will be adjourned from your public meeting.
Yes, thank you so much, Jen. We will be adjourned after, right? Yes. Okay, thanks, everyone.
And council members, there's a separate link. No, separate link. So look in your email. Thanks.